You know what you're listening to?
Is that a trick question?
It's the I Still Love This Game podcast with your host, Matthew Damian.
He's an idiot. Don't listen to this. He's an idiot.
Hello and welcome to episode 96 of the I Still Love This Game podcast. Just a quick note before I get into all the topics. I am feeling a little bit sick. I have a head cold as well as a migraine coming on. So if it sounds a little bit off, that's why. It's nothing personal. To quote the great George Costanza, which I love doing, man. It's not you, it's me. So I just want to get that out there quickly. All emails and prayers can go to matt@stilllovethisgame.com. Just kidding. Let's get straight into these topics because we got a lot. We have a lot to talk about today. And to begin, we're going to talk about the Golden State Warriors and their struggles. You know, it's funny to say that they're struggling because you look at them and they still have the second best record in the West. But you got to scratch the surface a little bit more here. They're 23-13. Signs of fatigue and cracks are beginning to show. And I said at the start of this season, who knows what's going to happen with Kevin Durant? And could we see a possibility that the Warriors preemptively trade this guy if they have no confidence in him sticking around and they're struggling? And I thought they would struggle when DeMarcus Cousins would come into the mix. In fact, he may actually save them, as ridiculous as that sounds. He's never saved any team before. In fact, they play better once he's gone, typically. The point is, though, that they're 6-4 in their last 10 games. And they're struggling against teams with 500 records. They're 13-9 in their own conference, and we know that's the conference they're going to have to come out. So if they're struggling in the regular season, it doesn't matter what the record is against the Eastern Conference teams until they get to the finals. So the West is such a logjam. I'm looking at it right now. I just pulled it up right now. They're currently 23-13. They are only 2.5 games ahead of Portland, who beat them last night. And when you think about that, if they continue to slide, I mean, this is not a situation where you can say, oh, Steph Curry's injured, just wait till he comes back, just wait till Klay Thompson he's injured as well. That's not a situation. That's not what's happening right now. They have a full complement of players. And I've always questioned this team, and I've taken a lot of backlash for that, even more backlash for that than I have with LeBron, and we're going to get to that in a moment as well. But I've always questioned this team's resolve in terms of their ability to counter. What happens when teams actually play really good defense on the perimeter against them? What happens when teams decide to really punish them inside, especially on the offensive glass? That's when they're susceptible. And I've never felt, even with a scorer of the versatility of Kevin Durant, that they never had a true counter to that. And they've just gotten lucky, to be totally honest with you, with their championships. The first championship, Drew Holiday was injured in the first round. Mike Conley was injured in the second round. Patrick Beverley was injured in the conference finals. And then, of course, we know Kyrie Irving and Kevin Love were injured. Now, the point that I'm making is you might say, well, some of these players, they're not huge names, but they're impactful players, especially when you think about who they'd be guarding. You know, Patrick Beverley, Mike Conley, Drew Holiday, all these guys can defend on the perimeter. Drew Holiday proved in the postseason last year as well. Not last year, last season. We're not in 2019 just yet. But he proved what an offensive player he is too. So he would make Steph Curry or Klay Thompson work on the other end of the court. The next season, we all know what happened. They won 73 games. They looked unbeatable in the regular season for the most part. When they were losing, they were getting blown out though. So that should be taken into account as well. They have no counter. And in the postseason, they look shaky, man. They look really, really susceptible, especially against Oklahoma, who had Durant at that point. Excuse my message tone once again, but they had Kevin Durant at that point. And then they were down, obviously, 3-1. They came back in that, but Oklahoma was able to really exploit them and expose them on the offensive glass. And because Golden State was getting killed in regards to that, they could not double Durant. They could not double Westbrook when they wanted to, and they were getting annihilated in the first 4 games. And then, of course, we saw the culmination of that in the NBA Finals. We saw Tristan Thompson really hurt them as well as LeBron, obviously, and Kyrie Irving, really hurt them on the glass. Even guys like J.R. Smith if Steph Curry was on J.R. Smith was going right at him. If he wasn't scoring, if he didn't get the ball, he was going right to the glass. And then, of course, the year before that, we saw Kawhi Leonard, and we don't know. Like, I'm not going to get up here and say that the Spurs definitely would have beaten them in the conference finals, but they were up big, double digits, before one of the dirtiest plays I've ever seen in basketball. And I've seen a lot of dirty plays in basketball. But that Zaza Pachulia quote-unquote closeout, where after Kawhi Leonard's already released the ball, he's taken about 4 other steps just to ensure that he's standing underneath him. And then, of course, Kawhi Leonard gets injured. They get swept without that guy. And then last season, down 3-2, Chris Paul gets hurt. He's out for the rest of the series. I honestly, hand on heart, I wouldn't say that the Spurs were definitely going to beat them, but my hand on heart, I will honestly say that if Chris Paul doesn't get injured, that the Rockets are the defending NBA champions right now. Now, the point that I'm making is this truly a great team? Because I forget about the resume, but at what point do you say, man, these guys, how lucky can you get to be given those cop-outs every single time? Because at some point, it's not like they overcame it and the adversity of the situation. It's not like they countered it. They just got lucky with these injuries. And when they didn't get lucky with the injuries, when the shoe was on the other foot, they blew a 3-1 lead. And that was, of course, up against Cleveland, in 2016. But if we're going to bring up injuries on the other side of it, as much as I like Andrew Bogut, if we're going to say that, well, Patrick Beverley wasn't that impactful of a player, then, well, okay, if we're going to disregard the contributions of Patrick Beverley, then we're also going to do that with Andrew Bogut. And there's absolutely no excuse for them losing that 3-1 series lead to Cleveland in 2016. So the point that I'm making here is now that teams have wised up to them, they know how to beat this team. Essentially, even though Houston did not finish the job last year, if nothing else, they've shown to the basketball world, this is how you beat Golden State. And this is why I've always been so reluctant to include them in the greatest teams of all time discussion. Because resume-wise, they belong in the Mount Rushmore, at least, in terms of their accomplishments, their winning percentages and their championships. But in terms of when you actually line them up against the 2001 Lakers, or the 96 Bulls, or the 86 Celtics, or the 85 Lakers, or whoever, the Detroit Pistons of the 80s, or the 95 Rockets, I've always felt, well, hold on a second. If you line up the accomplishments, yeah, sure. Golden State belongs maybe in a class of their own. But if we line them up and roll the balls out, of course, hypothetically, how are they going to stop Jordan? How are they going to stop Shaq? My God. How are they going to stop Larry Bird? How are they going to stop Magic Johnson? How are they going to stop Hakeem Olajuwon? What answers do they have defensively? Or more importantly, what answers do they have offensively? Because this is a team loaded with offensive talent, not really defensive talent. But offensively, how do they counter the defensive pressure of the 96 Bulls, or the Detroit Pistons, or the Lakers? They don't really have a whole lot of counter. And we've seen how they've struggled against teams like Memphis, or the San Antonio Spurs, or the Houston Rockets last season. We've seen, or the Cavs in the 2016 finals. We've seen how they've struggled against those teams, and we're not putting those teams in the same class as the Detroit Pistons, or the Chicago Bulls, or the Lakers of the early 2000s. Nobody's ever mentioned them in terms of if we're comparing defensive qualities. So now, if you're talking about the greatest teams of all time defensively, up against this Golden State Warriors team, there's no question in my mind that the Warriors would get absolutely demolished. The only thing they would have going for them is the offensive brilliance and versatility of Kevin Durant. Everyone else is inconsistent, and that includes Steph Curry. Steph Curry is amazing, maybe unguardable when he is on, but he's still inconsistent. You live by the three, you die by the three. What does he have beyond that three-point shot? And if you have a guy sticking with him, Scottie Pippen even, or Michael Jordan, great defensive players, Ron Harper, fantastic defensive player, and they're switching everything, absolutely everything. So those screen and rolls, that doesn't hurt the Bulls. Do you think if Dennis Rodman gets caught out in a switch with Steph Curry, they're going to panic? Absolutely not. Rodman has guarded Magic, he's guarded Larry Bird, he's guarded Jordan, he's guarded Karl Malone, he's guarded Shaq. Name me one other player in any sport that has guarded either the best or the second best player, arguably, right, at their position in such critical moments. He guarded Michael Jordan in the conference finals. He guarded Magic Johnson in the NBA finals. Larry Bird in the conference finals. Karl Malone in the NBA finals. And Shaq in the conference finals. These are not like isolation switches. These are guys that he was actually put on. That was his assignment. He did very well in all of those assignments. So the point that I'm making here is, let's not just look at the resume. Let's actually apply some eye test to this too when we're talking about this Golden State team. Because if based off their talent, and I'm not including DeMarcus Cousins in this, but based off their talent, Draymond Green, Kevin Durant, Klay Thompson, Steph Curry, if they are, to quote Dennis Green, if they are who we think they are, there's no way they should be struggling this bad. And that is on the players themselves, but it's also on Steve Kerr. If he's meant to be this great, great coach that people think he is, why are they struggling so bad? And if the answer is Kevin Durant, and because he's checked out mentally, and maybe he had checked out prior to this season, and we saw that situation with Draymond Green simmering because of that, or maybe it's a result of that situation that happened in that Clippers game, then he's got to go. Especially if he's not going to stick around. Trade him. Are you telling me that if Kevin Durant is the reason that they are struggling, and you still have Klay Thompson, you still have Steph Curry, you still have Draymond Green, those three alone got you 73 wins. Those three alone, for whatever asterisk you want to put it, they did get you an NBA title in 2015. If you add a Gordon Hayward and a Terry Rozier to this team, that they wouldn't at least be competitive? Because right now, if the playoffs started right now, I'd be surprised if they made the conference finals. And that might sound shocking to a lot of people, but that's just the way it is. Now, the flip side of it is, and I've had Lamont Joyner on the show before, and he's brought up a good point. He said maybe they're just bored. And that's a possibility as well. Maybe they are just bored. But surely, when you're that close to history, how many teams have three-peated in NBA history? 4, excuse me. Because the Bulls did it twice. But they were two very different teams. So you got the Bulls doing it twice in one decade. You got the Lakers in 2000 to 2002. And you had the Celtics who ran off 8 straight. So maybe you could include them doing it twice too. So, no, you've got plenty of teams that have repeated. But no team, apart from in the last, 15 years, 16 years, has repeated. LeBron James hasn't done it. Kobe Bryant hasn't done it in the last 15 years. He did it very early in his career. Tim Duncan never did it. If you're that close to history and you can't find a way to get yourself going and motivated, well, there's something wrong with this picture. And maybe it comes down to coaching. Or maybe it's a combination of all these factors. And as I said before, would it be funny if DeMarcus Cousins saves their season? But if they are pinning their hopes on DeMarcus Cousins, then they are screwed much worse than we ever thought they would be. Now, I know I did mention LeBron a second ago, and I said I was going to talk about him, but we're going to get to that. I'm going to put that on hold for a little bit as well. I did want to talk about James Harden. And look, there's been a lot of talk about him and his ability to get to the foul line or whatever. And I don't want to make this all about LeBron, but if you're a LeBron fan, you cannot complain about this. LeBron gets away with murder in terms of offensive fouls, just barreling into people and then throwing up his hands, and most of the time getting a foul call. Okay? And the amount of times LeBron initiates contact when he has the ball and and there's nothing called on him. I can't remember the last time an offensive foul was called on LeBron. And he complains and bellows much worse than James Harden. So I don't want to hear about that. If you're a LeBron fan. Now, if you're a fan of the game and you can't stand it, then yeah, I personally, I can't stand it either. to be honest with you. But I can't stand the contradictions if you're a LeBron fan and you hate the way that James Harden gets to the line. But speaking of James Harden, everyone tells me that I'm a hater of LeBron and all this nonsense, right? And that I should, quote unquote, just appreciate all the greatness that we're seeing, all right? How about we appreciate the greatness we've seen from James Harden in the last 8 games? I'm going to throw some stats at you because I looked this up. Last 8 games, 41 points per game. This is over 8 games, by the way. It's not like 1 or 2 games. Last 8 games is 41 points per game. They are 7-1. Their only loss came against Miami. I watched all of that game, and that was a hell of a game too. That came right down to the stretch, and not James Harden. Eric Gordon had a shot to tie the game up and send that to overtime. So that was a very winnable game too. 41 points per game. 7-1 record. 45% field goals, that's not great. His turnover numbers aren't that great either. 45% though from the field. 40% from 3-point territory. 9 rebounds per game. 6 assists per game. I don't like saying things that are controversial, but what I mean by that is I've got no problem saying things that I truly believe, and if they're controversial, then sure, I'll live with that. But I don't go out of my way to say things that are intentionally controversial. But this is the best I've ever seen him play. It's not even close. His team was struggling. His team was playing bad, really, really bad. They had the Carmelo hangover on this team. They are now rolling. And this is with Chris Paul missing the last 3 or 4 games. I think his last game was that Miami game. They are playing fantastic right now. And this is why you don't want to get into the whole regular season records too early, especially out in the West, which might sound like a contradiction what I was just saying about the Warriors. But the eye test tells me that James Harden is playing the best he's ever played. If Chris Paul can come in and be a compliment like he did last season to the level that James Harden is playing now, and Eric Gordon, as hard as he's played and as good as he's played, he's still not shooting the ball that well. If he's able to start shooting the ball a little bit better, this team's scary, man. This team has the ability to get right back to where they were last year, which is conference finals. I like what I was seeing in James Harden. And that 8-game stretch, I know what he did last season. I know how good he was last season. I know how good he was the season before. Hell, the season before that too. He's been very good for a long period of time in the regular season. So I don't say it lightly when I say that this is the best that I've ever seen him play. But over this 8-game stretch, this is the best I have ever seen him play. It's phenomenal. And I hope you guys are enjoying it too. Now it's time to address the whole LeBron thing. And my goodness. There's 3 things I want to talk about here with LeBron. Really 2. We can summarize it into 2 different sections. First of all, let's talk about his groin injury. And I'm not going to lie to you guys. I'm very suspicious about it. Because, we all know what a fraud award the MVP is. We saw this with Steve Nash winning it twice when he didn't deserve it. He didn't even deserve real consideration for it. In 2005, it should have been Allen Iverson. 2006, absolutely should have been Kobe Bryant. There is no question in my mind that if you replaced Nash with Kobe or Nash with Iverson, that the Suns would have been just as good, at least in the playoffs, or better. But if you put Nash on that Lakers team with Kwame Brown, Smoosh Parker, Chris Mim, Lamar Odom, they're not making the playoffs. And you put it on that 05 Sixers team, whose second top scorer was Mark Jackson. And not ESPN Mark Jackson, by the way. I'm talking Mark Jackson with a C on his first name. That's the level of talent. And he was able to get them to the playoffs too. So, and they were actually quite competitive as well, up against the Detroit Pistons, defending champion Pistons in the playoffs. So the point that I'm making is the MVP award, it's kind of like, what's the better story? I don't want to say that, but what is a better story? And there's no better example of that than last season, or the last 2 seasons. Russell Westbrook, after Kevin Durant left, averaged a triple-double. And by that's unbelievable. It really is unbelievable to average a triple-double throughout the season, and his team was significantly better off when he did put that triple-double up in terms of win percentages. It's not LeBron James triple-double in the NBA Finals up against the Warriors, where the Warriors just killed him anyway. It meant nothing. This actually meant if Russell Westbrook was getting a triple-double that season, in 2017, there's a good chance that Oklahoma was winning that game. Compare that to last season when he averaged a triple-double. He wasn't even All-NBA first team. It just shows the value of the story. So the point that I'm making here is we know what the Lakers' record was prior to last night. It's 20-14. Now it's 20-15. So that's a great record, by the way. It's much better than I thought they would be at this point. Well, not that much better. I did predict them to be around the 6-7 spot for the West. I didn't think, people think that I, said that they're going to be a disaster. That was in relation to people saying they were going to make the conference finals. And they may just do that in the way the West has just imploded from the top. I mean, it's before, this season, you usually have 2 or 3 genuine contenders, and you had the rest of the teams, like 4 to 10, were really competitive. Now it's 1 through 10 that are really competitive. You don't really have those standout teams. You don't have Houston. You don't have Golden State really emerging and separating themselves from the pack. It's quite close. So the Lakers still may actually make the conference finals, not because they're better than what we thought. It's just maybe the West isn't as top-heavy as it has been in the past few seasons. Regardless, they are 20-15 now. They're 20-14 with LeBron. And 7 of their next 8 games, they've already lost 1. So 7 of their next 8 games are against teams with winning records. Right? And there's a big possibility over that stretch that if LeBron misses all those games, they may go something like 1-8 because they've already got 1 loss already. Or 2-7 or something like that. And then people will point to this. And this has happened before. This happened with Steve Nash. They got off in Phoenix in the first year. They got off to a ridiculously good start. Steve Nash missed like 5 games. They lost all 5 games. And then people are like, well, he's got to be MVP then. And they voted for him based off that premise. So the point that I'm making here is, we've seen this before, not just from the MVP award. We've also seen this from LeBron, where he's lied to the public to manipulate a storyline. We saw it. It's not that long ago. Do you guys remember the NBA Finals? It wasn't that long ago. It was 6 or 7 months ago. And after Game 4, he comes up with that ridiculous black cast on his hand, saying that he broke his hand after Game 1. Do you guys remember that? It was insane. And then when he realized no one was buying it, he just ran away. If you break your hand, you're in a cast for 6 weeks. So where did the cast go? I've broken my hand so many times playing rugby that I have lost count of them. I would have to go through my medical history to see how many times I've broken fingers and hands. And each time it's been in a cast. Sometimes it's in longer. If you get a compound fracture, it's much, much longer. So he's not above faking injuries, is what I'm saying. So would he do this? I don't know. If I was a betting man, I'd say yes, he's doing this. If I was a jury in the court of law, I would say no, because there's not enough evidence. And at some point, you have to take a man for his word. But that being said, this is the conflicting part of it. Yeah, at some point, you do have to take a man for his word. But that being said, the boy can cry wolf only so many times before people start raising an eyebrow and thinking, hold on a second. Because the sad thing about all of this is even though they are sitting pretty well in the standings, let's just have a look at this. They are 20-15 now. They were 20-14 when this injury happened. They are only 1 game above the 9th seeded Spurs. 1.5 games as well above the 10th spot. So even though they are sitting number 5, that's not a comfortable number 5. Excuse me. So what I'm getting at, Houston is rising. We're going to see teams like the Spurs continue to rise. They've won 8 of their last 10. Memphis has dropped off quite a bit, but they're still competitive. I don't think Dallas is going to really compete. I think Utah will. I think Minnesota will. They'll rise as well. And New Orleans, depending, if they don't trade Anthony Davis, I fully expect them to emerge as well, to challenge for a playoff spot as well. Now, you've got other teams, not named the Lakers, that could fall off. You've got, say, the Clippers and the Kings that could conceivably slip out of the top 8 as well. So it's not just the Lakers. But if LeBron messes around here and they go 2-7, and they're suddenly, the 10th seed? And if he really did this just to garner MVP momentum, what does that tell you about this guy? What does that tell you about him? And you guys might think I'm crazy, but let's just see how the media narrative and the media spins this into a storyline. Let's just have a look. Just wait and see. I hope I'm wrong with this, because I would hate to see a team get sabotaged like that. But it wouldn't surprise me if he's done this. You know, this is the same guy, the same media camp that he has, that circulated a rumor about Delonte West to justify his bad play in the playoffs and why he had to get out of Cleveland. And it wasn't just Delonte West, it was his own mother as well. And that's as far as I'll go into it. Google it if you want to check it out, because it's pretty eye-opening stuff. But if he's willing to stoop to that low, would he also, what's stopping him from pretending that he popped a muscle in his groin? And if you pop the muscle as well, because I've popped my groin before, but if you've ever popped any muscle, there's no disguising that, by the way. There's no mistaking popping a muscle. Once you feel a pop, you know it's a pop. There's nothing you can confuse that with. But you're not walking off the court. Unless if you're Kobe Bryant. You tear your freaking Achilles. You make a couple of foul shots. But tearing your Achilles is totally different too. That's something I've never done though. But I'm assuming tearing your Achilles is totally different to just tearing a groin muscle. Now, the other thing that I need to discuss with LeBron, and this is even more unfortunate that we even have to bring it up, but the responses that I was receiving made it that I had to, I had no choice. If I value my own integrity, I have to respond to this. And it has to do with LeBron getting up on his own TV show. What is it called? Shut Up and Dribble? Something like that. I don't know. We know what it's a reference to. It's a reference to that Fox anchor who invited him on his TV show after he said that Trump's just a racist. So if she got up, what's her name? Laura Ingraham, that's her name. Excuse me. I don't watch the show, but I've seen the clip. And she got up and she invited him to come on her show to discuss it. Obviously, she's a conservative. She's on Fox News. And he declined. Just like he declined going to the White House to discuss things as well. Which kind of makes you think, though, if Trump was such a racist, why would he be inviting people of color to come and discuss these issues to see if there's a way to sort of fix issues? Regardless, I'm not going to get into that. What I'm going to get into is we know what the name of the show is. And it's kind of I don't want to say it's a bitch move, but it's kind of a bitch move because nobody counters him. He's created this situation where he gets up and talks, and you might think, well, what's the difference between your podcast, Matt? I always welcome, excuse me, I always welcome people to come on the show. They always decline it. But once again, the offer is out there. If you disagree with me, send me an email. I'll respond to it. If you want to come on the show, state your case, and don't be hard to get, because there's people that have said, "Oh, I want to come on your show," and I've been more than accommodating in terms of time slots for them to call them, and they just decline or they just don't show up. But the point that I'm making is I always welcome discussion. If you go to my social media pages, you will see how much I welcome discussion. I will actually respond to people. I'm not one of these idiot fan pages that will post like one line and then let people duke it out in the comment sections. I'll actually respond because I believe what I say. Anyway, the point is, on the LeBron show, This is after he said that I think it was the first episode or something like that. I remember him saying words along the lines that it took a while for him to fuck with white people. Or something like that. He didn't trust white people. That in of itself is racist. But anyway, in his most recent show, he stated that NFL owners are quote-unquote old white men with a quote-unquote slave mentality. Now, that's cute. And what's even cuter about it is I'm pretty sure he means a slave owner's mentality. So we'll just assume that's what he meant. If he felt that they had a slave mentality, then that's a totally different thing. But I'd be willing to bet the house that he meant a slave owner's mentality. Now, what I wanted to get into this is, first of all, can you imagine if one of these quote-unquote old white men said that the NBA players were, quote, millennial black men with a, quote, thug mentality? I mean, can you really imagine what the outrage would be if we saw that or we heard that? The problem that LeBron has put himself into now is either he really believes this nonsense, but that would also make him unbelievably lacking in self-awareness. Because later on in his show, he was praising Adam Silver. Right now, but obviously he's referring to the Kaepernick situation and the NFL players kneeling, right? And Kaepernick's no longer in the league, and I'll get to that in a second. But how can you praise the NBA when the NBA has a rule that prevents NBA players from kneeling? You must stand for the anthem. The NFL didn't have that when Kaepernick was in the league. And they only just brought in a rule now where it was up to the teams to find the players. So it's either that he's lacking in self-awareness or he's a race baiter who is desperate for attention. Or he's both. I mean, it's up to that. But the thing is, and I mentioned this in the when Kaepernick signed with Nike episode, that this whole thing was marketing, and it became a situation where it became about attention. Who's kneeling? Who's not kneeling? And the TV networks that were televising the games played into it big time. You know, they never showed the players that were standing. They only showed the players that were kneeling. What did the other players do? They wanted the attention. They wanted the limelight. Now it's LeBron's turn. And look, I said that those who will instantly think that any counter to what he says is an attempt to silence him. And I'm going to get to that in a minute. This is why I'm doing this response right now. But you need to look at yourself. You can call me a hater, you can call me a racist, you can call me all that stuff. But why are you saying that? You are saying that in an attempt to silence me. Isn't that exactly what you're accusing me and people who disagree with him of doing? You know, LeBron is allowed to say what he wants to. He's allowed to voice his opinion. Of course he is. But guess what? Everyone is allowed to either agree with him or disagree with him. I do not understand the worship that is associated with him. The other part of this is if LeBron really feels this way in regards to social justice and all this stuff, why haven't we seen him still get on one knee for the anthem? Why doesn't he just take a stand? Is it because, he wants to promote the NBA? He wants to throw shots the same way that he throws shots at Michael Jordan. He's throwing shots at the NFL. He wants to throw shots without accountability. Excuse me. So the issue with kneeling now, as I said before, is it's turned into an attention grab. And it's nothing but drama. And now it's LeBron's turn to use it to have people to talk about him. Mike Tyson, for everything that's said about Mike Tyson, all the things he has done in the past, all the antics, whether it was biting Holyfield's ear or starting fights at the press conference with Lennox Lewis and biting his leg, things like that. He's had some incredible quotes. My favorite sports quote of all time, without question, is that everyone has a game plan until they get punched in the face. You can apply that to anything. That's how solid that quote is. And there's another one. I just watched oh God, what was his name? I watched the 30 for 30 boxing one with Mike Tyson and Buster Douglas, excuse me, and that fight. And Tyson was interviewed, and he said that fame and attention can be more destructive than a narcotic. And I thought, whoa, that's such a good, that's an incredible quote once again from Mike Tyson. I mean, I need to buy more of his books, just as, I hope they're full of quotes like that, because that's powerful. And you see that more and more now with social media. Now, the other thing that I wanted to point out as well in all of this is, if LeBron wants to talk about slave owners, or slave mentalities, excuse me, LeBron makes millions of dollars every year. Excuse me. He makes millions of dollars every year from shoes that are made in Southeast Asia. And workers get paid less than $2 per day. Yet we don't hear a peep from him regarding a slave mentality from Nike or himself. So is this just another example about him preaching inequality, but doing a completely different thing in reality? All the virtue signaling in the world does not and will not change who you are. Now, as I said, I posted these on my social media accounts, and the responses were predictable for the most part. Because, and I even acknowledged that. I said, look, if you're going to try to silence me on this, but then accuse me of trying to tell LeBron to shut up, then you're completely hypocritical. And, I got some good discussions out of it. But on the whole, the amount of anger for just simply disagreeing with what LeBron said was eye-opening. And I wanted to respond to it on here, because a lot of you guys don't follow my social media, which is fine. Look, I don't care. Obviously I welcome people to come on the social media pages at times, because it's good discussions. And as I said before, when I get people on the social media and they post something, I typically will respond to them, because I enjoy having the conversations. I don't think, oh, you're just part of my audience, you're there to be seen, or you're there for the numbers to go up, you're not to be heard from. Absolutely not. I try to learn from you guys as much as hopefully you learn from me. That's the beauty of discussions and debates. But that being said, as I said, I know a lot of you guys don't go on the social media pages, and you'll see me actually respond to some of this stuff on the podcast, or you'll hear me, post or respond to it on the podcast, and you've got no idea what I'm talking about. So I wanted to show you exactly some of the stuff that I get when I post anything negative, or it's considered negative, about LeBron. Because as I said before, it is eye-opening. And let's begin with, I guess, a positive one. Well, it's not even a positive one, it was a neutral one, from CJ Bowens. And he says, my dad is a huge activist, but he doesn't speak on the Caps situation anymore. Why? Because eventually teams caved in and offered him a job as a backup, the Seahawks and Ravens. He turned them both down. When you start being picky, that's when I cannot stand with you. That's when it becomes all about skill and not skin color. Now, someone's responded to him, Mako Figgins, I believe that's how you pronounce his name. The Ravens never offered him a job, never offered him a tryout. Seahawks wanted him to not be an activist. And CJ responded to him and said, that's incorrect. The Seahawks and Ravens offered him jobs. The Ravens actually came to him before RG3. My dad followed the cap situation like his life depended on it. The Ravens' job offer was very low-key and the media didn't even blow it up. He's actively turning down deals. That's when you got to say, I support your protest as a person, but I don't support you as a player. Look, as I said, I don't necessarily agree with all of what CJ Bowens is saying. I think... But I get where he's coming from. I respect that. Because it's actually a conversation. He's putting his 2 cents in. But then you get other idiots. Drew Parker, for example. And this is when a bunch of people unlike your page. I mean, I don't give a fuck. I really don't care. The moment that I start putting posts up so people like my page is the moment that I sell this to somebody else who can then market it for t-shirts or whatever. That is not why I run this page. And if people are going to... I will tell you right now, I believe everything I post. Everything I post, I will believe and I will defend. Same as in the book. Same as on the podcast. I will defend everything. I will admit when I'm wrong, if someone can prove to me that I'm wrong. But I will never, in my life, allow my page to be dictated to by who likes it and who doesn't. Because here's the dirty little lie when it comes to Facebook or social media in general. It is nearly all of it is run by bots, not people. Those 10,000 people that like my page or whatever, I would say probably a quarter of them are real people. The rest are probably bots, or at least burner accounts, who just troll the hell out of pages. So if I care that 30 or 40 people left my page, I could not give a shit. And if that's your response, have at it. You can leave too if you want. I don't care. Next person. Tim Barr. People hate the truth. I'm assuming he's not talking about Paul Pierce. And you better watch your mouth. Okay. Whatever. Matt Flo. Until he kneels in the NBA, then the leagues are no different. Actually, the NBA is worse because you can get on that line and you're told to stand on for that anthem. Who owns all the NBA teams? If I work for one of LeBron's businesses, can I tell him what to do? And if he says anything back, can I call him a slave driver? Or do I not get that special treatment because I got the wrong skin color? Essentially. Essentially. Next person, Andrew Bullard. I think he has a point. Cap still doesn't have a job. And like CJ Bowen said before, he has had job opportunities. But here's the other thing about this, right? Kaepernick opted out of his deal. It's not like he was cut on the spot because he knelt. Actually, people forget this. He actually sat on the bench prior to kneeling. And it was like, there was plenty of games where he was actually sitting on the bench and then he was talked into kneeling, which is one of the great ironies, by the way, because it's a bigger act of submission than standing, but whatever. But my response was he had opportunities, but he's just as accountable for not being in the league as the owners themselves. If it was just about the kneeling, then how is Malcolm Jenkins still in the league, or Eric Reed, or any of the other players that knelt? And then there's a response, dude, come on, you lost a like today. I mean, I don't care. I don't care. If that's your response, quite frankly, I don't want you here. The reason I created these social media pages was to get dialogue within the community and to engage the community. It's not so I could, go up to a girl and say, oh, look at all my likes on Instagram. I'm already married. I don't care about that. It's like, at what point? Like, I don't care about the like. I would prefer there be some substance. And then someone responded, man, I agree. He ain't say nothing false. I can name a few. Obviously, he's referring to supporting LeBron. So I responded with, see, there's no substance here. Kaepernick opted out of his contract, sabotaged himself, or at least his girlfriend did, out of a Ravens offer. Then he filed a lawsuit against the NFL. And you think you think him not being in the league is an example of a slave mentality? Seriously. And if it's because of him kneeling, then why aren't the other players that kneeled also out of the league? Forrest Clyde, who is a pretty big supporter of this page, by the way. So what's up, Forrest? Please show me the documents where slaves were paid by their owners millions of dollars and put them in the top 5%, try top 0.5% of all income earners, and then allowed them to leave the plantation to spend their money as they wish. LeBron is a great ball player, but he's one of the top 3 attention whores of all time. I'd put him maybe even higher than that in terms of the top attention whores of all time. That's a great point. And it's totally underrated in all this. Slavery is something you're essentially born into. You don't opt into it. Nobody's forcing anybody to be in the NFL. In fact, the opposite. They are demanding Kaepernick to be in the NFL. So this, if anyone has the slave owner mentality, not the slave mentality, but the slave owner mentality, it's the players and the people that quote unquote kneel with Cap. Next one, it's from that Mako Fegans again, actually. He's not responding to a comment, though. He actually left it. I liked this page until I figured out it was ran by bigots. So questioning LeBron equals being a bigot. Unbelievable. And they, people who say that, they wonder why people are becoming awfully comfortable being called a bigot. Because if you disagree with somebody that they worship, this is another human being, by the way, right? But they worship somebody like this. And if you disagree with them, you're instantly a bigot. Mako Figgins again. For somebody who wanted to leave my page, he's leaving a lot of comments. But this one actually gets funny. So enjoy this one. You hate black people, but your entire page is built off the back of black people. Okay. Sorry, I shouldn't laugh. But first of all, how do I hate black people? Because I disagreed with one black person. Apparently, I hate all black people. And how is my page built off the back of black people? I am not a black person. I built my page. I built this podcast. I wrote my book. Not one black person, not anyone else, to be honest with you, outside of Matt Hanley, who did the forward, assisted me with any of that. I did that. I suppose you could say some of the guests that have been black, such as Houston White and Ernest Christian, they've assisted me. But oh my God. I mean, honestly, fuck off. I mean, I do not hate black people. I play basketball with black people. I talk to black people. I don't hate black people. I interact with them. I have much respect and admiration for people in general. I don't see somebody as a black person and go out of my way and think, oh, I must talk to them because they're black. When I first moved here to Toledo, went and got a haircut, and there was a black person, and he was on one of those walker things. He was older. And after I got the haircut, this is hot. This is during the summer, by the way. He was heading in the direction of where I was living. I gave him a lift. If I hated black people, would I give him a lift? You piece of fucking shit. Anyway, I responded to him. I said, how do I hate black people? And this gets even better. He goes, your microaggressions are quite profound. So the same cocksucker that said to me that it called me a bigot, right? Because I disagreed with somebody, is talking about my microaggressions and says my microaggressions equate me to being a racist or hating black people. But yet he will turn around and call me a bigot, and that's not a quote-unquote microaggressions. Seriously, go fuck yourself, you fucking loser. And speaking of losers, we're going to finish this up with the last one was saying to call out, to fight a call out on racism with fake racism, you trolling and your white sheet is showing. Obviously, that's a reference to the KKK. So now, apparently, I'm being accused, not apparently, I definitely am being accused of being in the KKK for disagreeing with LeBron James about his stance or his opinions of NFL owners having a quote-unquote slave mentality. If you do not worship LeBron James, if you do not agree with LeBron James, this is the type of backlash you receive. It's unbelievable. LeBron could play a basketball game, lose a game, and then come out into the press conference in a fucking wheelchair, say that he broke 6 vertebrae in his back and played with a broken back, and people would believe it. If you call LeBron anything, if someone calls LeBron James Jesus and you disagree with it, they'll call you this. They are so delusional. It is unbelievable. And he feeds right into it. He loves it. He loves it. He absolutely loves it. Someone sent me an email a while ago. It was about a month ago. It may have, don't quote me on the date, really. It was the second show of this. And he was talking about how Jordan doesn't do enough. How the hell would he know that Jordan doesn't do enough? And the fact that he would do this, why doesn't he pick up the phone and actually call up Jordan and bring that up? Rather than, what kind of a bitch move is that? To create a TV show and then go say, oh, he isn't doing enough. He is not doing enough. And yet he's got the audacity to get so butthurt over someone saying shut up and dribble that he won't go and defend himself, but he'll just go and create a TV show named after that. He will the levels of passive aggressive. I don't know where he's going with this. I personally think for a while now, and people close to me know this, I've held off saying this, but he's trying to create himself to be the next Muhammad Ali. And I don't mean that in terms of good, because he's doing this to make money. He's doing this he doesn't care about social inequality. If he did that, he would make sure all those Indonesian workers, not Chinese workers, which a lot of you got confused with when I said Southeast Asia, that is not a reference to China. It's a reference to actually Indonesia and Malaysia and places like that. And if he's got an issue with social inequality, why is he using labor there where it's only $2 a day? That's the point I'm making. It's easy to point the finger at somebody else rather than point the finger at yourself. And that's why he's full of it. He's full of crap. He's not to be believed. He's almost like a politician. I've been saying that for years. He reminds me so much of a politician. Like even how people point to quote unquote his school. 80% of that is taxpayer money. 80%. And that's only if it has 100% attendance rate. If it doesn't have 100% attendance rate, it's not even 20% that he has to pay. And when I say he has to pay, his foundation has to pay. People that donate money to his foundation. That's not money coming out of his bank account. That's people donating money to charities, to his charity. Unbelievable. And then for him to have the nerve, because Jordan doesn't get up there and preach and virtue signal that he's not doing enough? Like, who is this person? He's not interested in... I could... The thing is, he's not a bad basketball player. When I say that, he's a top 10 player of all time. But all this nonsense, the game will be better off when he's gone. I've said that before and I stand by that. And it's just funny because I get a lot of messages from people that I have known over the years. And they're caught into this dogma too. It's like a cult. LeBron is a cult. Being a fan of LeBron James, you're a cult. You're a part of a cult. Because you do not look at facts anymore. You'll look at your feelings and you just get sucked into this whole lifestyle. And I've been thinking about this for a while now, since the last episode. Like, why is the NBA so obsessed with stars? It's because the product sucks. It really does. You know, and the only thing keeping it going is the drama and is the star power. That's why they are so desperate to make sure that the stars make the finals every single year. Excuse me. You know, you don't see that in baseball. You don't see that in basketball. You know, you'll see Trent Dilfer and Kerry Collins battle it out in a Super Bowl. It doesn't matter. They'll still get good ratings because the product overall is good. It's funny to say this because the NFL has had situations with replacement refs. You know, Major League Baseball has had betting scandals with players. Pete Rose comes to mind. You know, we could go way back as well to I think it was the White Sox with a betting scandal where they actually betted against themselves. They've had that kind of stuff, but people still think they're more legitimate leagues than the NBA. Because the NBA is obsessed with actually making sure that the stars still make the finals every single year. There is at least one Hall of Famer in the finals every single year. And it's because they've created a nasty little cycle where the players are bigger than the game itself. That's not good. That's not sustainable. Because eventually, what happens when those players retire? Those fans go away then. You have to create a new one. And you have to continue to appeal and appeal and appeal. That's why basketball will never be bigger than football. It will never, ever be bigger than football. The only way that football will go under is if people stop playing football. I.e., like, the concussions are just too bad. And that will never happen. You'd have to have something massive happen in society. I'm talking like another world war or an alien invasion or something like that to happen where people just lose their interest before people stop playing football and stop caring about sports. But if they stop playing football because of that, they're going to stop playing basketball because of that too. Anyway, I got a little bit off topic with that. The other thing is, I'm not going to stop. You know, people, I don't take being called a racist lightly or being compared to or accused of being in the KKK lightly. But it's water off a duck's back at this point because people are so desperate. Look, if I was wrong, they would point me out. They wouldn't have to resort to that. They wouldn't have to accuse me of being that. They would just say, you're wrong because it's such and such. See, if I said that Gary Payton averaged 45 points per game one season, they'd say, no, he didn't. And they'd show me his career statistics. And they'd prove me wrong. The fact that they have to resort to that kind of vindicates me a little bit. You know, I'm not saying I'm 100% right. There's people, as I said, CJ Bowen said stuff that I disagree with. Other people have said stuff that I disagree with. But they didn't accuse me of being a racist. So I'm not going to stop. If I see something, it doesn't matter if Kevin Durant said this, or if LeBron James said this, or if Michael Jordan said this, or if Allen Iverson said this, I would disagree with him because it's simply not true. And if you want to point to somebody like Jerry Jones as being maybe having a slave mentality, first of all, that's such a stretch. But if you're going to point to that as your example, that's one dude. That is one guy. If we're not like that would be the equivalent of me saying that all NBA players have a thug mentality because of Allen Iverson. Or all NFL players are murderers. Or, dog killers or whatever. Because of Aaron Hernandez or Michael Vick. That's insane. You wouldn't do that, so why do it for the others? And if you're accusing them of that, then my goodness. If that's the level... If that's what people have a problem with in society, is now NFL players feel that they're slaves, then my goodness, we're doing something right with society. Because NFL players are treated better than so many people in the world. And it's a choice. Nobody forces them to do that. You know, and after you do it for a few years, they can walk away and not work another minute in their life. It's not some single mother who has to work 3 jobs because she has a couple of kids that she has to support. Nobody is forcing them to do this. And the fact remains, Colin Kaepernick opted out of his contract. He's demanding that he go back to the NFL. Or at least that's what his supporters are saying. If they are demanding that he goes back, like, who comes up with this nonsense? I mean, who seriously believes it? Are people that desperate to be considered victims in this world? You have people starving in the streets. And nobody gives a shit about them. And then all of a sudden, because this one attention whore, or 2 attention whores, Kaepernick and him, want to get up and play victims, that suddenly all NFL owners have a slave mentality. You know what? If all NFL owners have slave mentalities, but the NBA is so grand, but we're calling all NFL slave owners slave mentality, because of Jerry Jones, then explain to me Donald Sterling. How many players played in the same league when Donald Sterling was running the Clippers? Does that mean we should judge all NBA players from that era? For not taking a stand? For not boycotting Clipper games? No. They didn't care. It's virtue signaling. And you're smarter than that. Don't buy into it. Because it's absolute bullshit. Anyway. I was in a good mood before I started this podcast. I had to respond to that though. If people call me a racist, I am going to respond to that. I'm going to defend that I'm not a racist. That being said, you're all fucking idiots if you really believe that. I mean, I have said nothing but complimentary things towards most NBA players. And then because I disagree with one of them, I'm a racist. You gotta laugh at it. You gotta love it. You really have got to love it. I mean, instead of actually arguing that whether he was right or wrong, that's the response. And I've got to be honest, there were some great responses to that. But when you see people getting up, I had somebody message me who I had spoken to briefly on Instagram. We were going to do a football podcast. I actually set up a brand and everything. It was called NFL Forever. And he was from the United States, and this is when I was still in Australia. He said he was going to come play American football in Australia for a little bit. And we got along. We'd messaged every so often, and we were even doing a top 5 countdown for each position of all time. And of course, he chimed in. And he's one of the biggest LeBron fans I've ever seen in my life. You cannot say anything bad about LeBron James around him. And he was saying how he wants his friend back and all this bullshit. Fuck you. I moved over here. I got married. Right? He says that he's been keeping tabs on me and he's listened to every podcast. What kind of a friend, right, ignores all of that? Doesn't say a word to me. No congratulations, no good luck. If you need anything, I'm here. I'm just a message away. None of that. But the moment I say something bad about LeBron James, there's something wrong with you, man. I studied psychology. I majored in psychology at university. I can tell. And then I said, well, show me where the hate is. Of course, he fucked off. He never messaged me after that. Wow. Just wow. Don't give me that shit. Then I had another person who I grew up playing basketball with. He just flat out, he said how ridiculous of a statement it was. I said, okay, what was ridiculous about it? I'm not going to engage in a conversation with you. And the idiot, blocked the page, but didn't block me personally. So if I was logged into my personal account, I could see that. I could still see it, but I couldn't see it. So that's how I know he blocked it. Like, you can't make this stuff up. Tell me it's not a cult. I dare you to tell me it's not a cult. Anyway, 2019 is around the corner. It's going to be interesting. Well, I'm going to finish on something much more positive, and that's Derrick Rose, man. Derrick Rose, I am so glad that he's playing well. He should be an all-star this year. When you look at it, typically 6 guards will make the team. At least they should. So you've got, obviously, Steph Curry will make it from votes alone. Russell Westbrook will make it, as will James Harden, obviously. You got Damian Lillard. I get the feeling I'm missing somebody here. I can't think of anybody that really jumps out at me, at least in the Western Conference, because I know people do they've changed it. I'm assuming it's going to be like how it was last year, where you have the 2 captains, but the selection criteria is still the same. They go by the conferences, so there's an equal number of participants from either conference, but then it gets mixed up. Regardless, I would vote for him. I don't like the All-Star game, but I think selections still have a bit of value to it. How you do in the game means nothing to me. But yeah, I'd like to see Derrick Rose back. I can't think of a good reason for him to not be back. I mean, you're going to go with Klay Thompson over this guy right now? Maybe DeRozan? Chris Paul? I don't think so. Derrick Rose. What a comeback story. One of the great stories we've had in the NBA this year. Probably the greatest. He scored 50 points against Utah. Playing big minutes for him. I thought he'd just be a backup player behind Teague. It's not the case. Quite honestly, he's been their best player. And I'm very happy for him. Anyway, guys, 2019. I hope you have a great year. We've got big things planned once again for the brand, and we're going to keep building it. And I hope you enjoy the content. Continue to share it with your friends, and I'll see you on the other side. Have a safe New Year's, safe holidays, and episode 100 is getting closer and closer. So I'm excited about that. But Happy New Year's, guys, and I'll see you soon.